Ethan Draven adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit as he stepped into the Valorian Summit's grand chamber. The air was oppressively still, a sterile metallic tang filling his nose. Above, the domed ceiling shimmered with interlaced light panels that cast a cold, clinical glow over the room. Rows of Valorian delegates sat perfectly aligned, their shimmering silver skin and angular features giving them an almost statuesque quality. Not one of them moved or blinked unnecessarily, their focus fixed on Ethan as though they were a single, unified entity. "Charming," Ethan muttered under his breath, flashing a quick, practiced smile. His voice echoed faintly in the vast, silent chamber, a sound swallowed almost immediately by the room's acoustics. He strode to the center of the room, where a circular podium awaited him. As he stepped into the spotlight, the subtle hum of alien technology filled the silence, a sound like distant static just on the edge of hearing. A holographic interface blinked to life in front of him, glowing faintly in the sterile light. Ethan swiped a hand across the console, summoning a series of images and videos meant to represent Earth's cultural achievements. "Esteemed delegates of Valoria," Ethan began, his voice confident despite the weight of countless alien stares boring into him. "On behalf of humanity and Earth, I'm honored to present this exchange of culture, knowledge, and diplomacy." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the Valorian delegates, a synchronized tilt of their heads that was almost unnerving in its precision. Ethan paused, mentally reminding himself that the Valorians weren't big on individual expression. Everything about them screamed logic and order. There was no room here for spontaneity or emotion, two things Ethan had in spades. "We believe," Ethan continued, activating the first holographic display, "that understanding each other's histories and achievements is key to building a prosperous partnership. Humanity's strength lies in its creativity, adaptability, and—" A shrill beep interrupted him. The hologram flickered, its projections distorting into jagged lines before freezing altogether. Ethan stared at the malfunctioning interface, his brow furrowing. Okay. Technical hiccup," he said, his voice light and casual. "We'll just wing it." He waved a dismissive hand at the hologram, then turned back to the delegates. For a moment the room remained silent, the Valorians frozen as though processing his words. Then the whispers began, soft, dissonant murmurs rippling through the chamber like static electricity. Ethan glanced toward the delegation's leader, high strategist Milex, who leaned toward his second-in-command, his silver skin catching the light as he murmured something. Ethan caught the word wing, but nothing else. Great, Ethan thought, forcing a smile. 10 minutes in, and I've already confused them. Clearing his throat, he pressed on. Let's start with something simple. Art. For humans, art isn't just decoration. It's how we express emotion, history, and even ideas that words can't capture. He activated another hologram, this one displaying images of Earth's iconic artworks, Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, Van Gogh's Starry Night, Picasso's Guernica. Ethan gestured toward the projections, explaining their cultural significance. "What you see here are pieces of human history, each one representing different periods, emotions, and perspectives," he said. "Take this one, for example." He pointed to Guernica, the angular chaos of its composition stark against the sterile Valorian backdrop. "It's a response to war, a depiction of destruction, grief, and resilience." The murmurs grew louder, the Valorian silvery eyes narrowing as they studied the images. Ethan noticed several of them exchanging glances, their expressions unreadable but tense. Milex raised a hand, silencing the chamber with a sharp gesture. "Earth Delegate Draven," he said, his voice smooth and clipped. "Are these strategic diagrams?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Strategic diagrams?" "No, they're art, expressions of the human experience." "Experience," Milex repeated, the word rolling off his tongue like a foreign concept. "Explain further." "Well," Ethan hesitated, searching for a way to bridge the gap. "Art isn't always meant to be literal. It's emotional. It's chaotic, sure, but that's the point. Humans thrive in chaos." Milex's head tilted slightly, his silver eyes narrowing. "Your species thrives in chaos?" The room fell eerily silent again, the hum of technology the only sound. Ethan suddenly felt as though he'd stepped onto thin ice, but he pressed forward. "Yes," he said, his tone measured now. "Our history is full of challenges, wars, disasters, revolutions. But through all of it, we've adapted. Our creativity, our unpredictability, it's what makes us strong." Milex leaned back, his gaze piercing. "Strength through chaos," he said slowly, as though tasting the words. He turned to his second-in-command, murmuring something too faint for Ethan to hear. Whatever it was, it sent a ripple of tension through the delegates. Ethan glanced at the next segment of his presentation, images and clips of human achievements in sports, science, and exploration. He hesitated for a moment, but decided to push forward. "Let me show you another aspect of our culture. Competition." He activated the next hologram, which displayed clips of soccer matches, track and field events, and even a rocket launch. The energy of the scenes stood in stark contrast to the room's sterile stillness, the cheers and movement bursting like fireworks against the cold backdrop. "This is how humans resolve challenges," Ethan explained, "through games, sports, and exploration. It's how we channel our instincts and learn to work together." The murmurs returned, louder this time. Ethan caught snippets of words: training, combat, tactics. A sinking feeling settled in his chest as he realized the Valorians weren't seeing teamwork or camaraderie. They were seeing military drills. "Your species engages in organized conflict simulations?" Milex asked, his tone sharper now. Ethan opened his mouth to respond but faltered. He hadn't intended to frame it that way, but in hindsight he could see how the Valorians might interpret it. Their society thrived on precision and order. To them, Earth's chaotic, high-energy competitions probably did look like war games. "Well, not exactly," Ethan began, but Milex cut him off. "Fascinating," the high strategist said, his voice clipped. "And concerning. Perhaps we have underestimated your species' preparations." Ethan's stomach sank. "Preparations for what?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "For war," Milex said, his gaze cold and calculating. "Your art, your games, even your history, everything you've shown us points to a species honing itself for conflict." "That's not—" Ethan started, but Milex raised a hand, silencing him. "Enough," the high strategist said. "We must deliberate." With that, Milex and his advisors rose in unison and exited the chamber, leaving Ethan alone in the sterile silence. He stood there, staring at the still flickering holograms, his mind racing. "Well," he muttered to himself, his voice echoing faintly in the empty room, "that could have gone better." As the chamber doors closed behind the Valorian delegation, Ethan felt a chill creep down his spine. The hum of the holographic interface buzzed faintly, almost mocking in its persistence. He had come here to bridge cultures, to foster understanding. Instead, he might have just started a diplomatic crisis, and he had no idea how to fix it. Ethan Draven paced the empty chamber, muttering to himself as his mind raced for a way to salvage the summit. The pristine walls gleamed under the cold light, the faint hum of alien machinery providing the only sound. The Valorian delegation's abrupt exit hung over him like a storm cloud, the words, "preparations for war," replaying in his head. "Great job, Draven," he said to himself, running a hand through his hair. "Your big diplomatic debut, and they think you're a warmonger." The chamber doors hissed open, and Ethan turned sharply to see a young Valorian enter. Their features were similar to the others, angular, silver skin shimmering faintly, but their expressions seemed softer, more inquisitive than the cold stares he'd received earlier. "I am Azrix," the Valorian said, inclining their head in a gesture Ethan assumed was a greeting. "I am here to assist in clarifying your intent." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Clarify? What's there to clarify? Your people think my PowerPoint presentation is a declaration of war." Azrix tilted their head. "PowerPoint? This term does not translate. It's a—" "Never mind," Ethan said, waving a hand. "What I mean is, everything I said was taken completely out of context. This summit was supposed to build trust, not send your leaders running for the nearest battle fleet. Azrix blinked slowly, their gaze unnervingly steady. It is not unusual for misunderstandings to occur. Your species' methods of communication are intricate. Intricate's one way to put it, Ethan muttered. Azrix gestured for him to sit, and the two of them settled at a small circular table near the edge of the chamber. Perhaps I can provide insight into the Valorian perspective, Azrix offered, and in return, you may explain certain perplexing aspects of your presentation. Deal, Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. Shoot. Azrix's gaze flickered with curiosity. Your smile, for example. You displayed it several times during your address. In Valorian culture, such an expression is interpreted as a mating invitation. Ethan nearly choked. A what? Oh, no. Smiling is just friendliness. It's how humans show we're being nice. Fascinating, the High Strategist said, his voice clipped. And concerning. Perhaps we have underestimated your species' preparations. Ethan's stomach sank. Preparations for what? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. For war, Milex said, his gaze cold and calculating. Your art, your games, even your history, everything you've shown us points to a species honing itself for conflict. That's not, Ethan started, but Milex raised a hand, silencing him. Enough, the High Strategist said. We must deliberate. With that, Milex and his advisors rose in unison and exited the chamber, leaving Ethan alone in the sterile silence. He stood there, staring at the still flickering holograms, his mind racing. Well, he muttered to himself, his voice echoing faintly in the empty room. That could have gone better. As the chamber doors closed behind the Valorian delegation, Ethan felt a chill creep down his spine. The hum of the holographic interface buzzed faintly, almost mocking in its persistence. He had come here to bridge cultures, to foster understanding. Instead, he might have just started a diplomatic crisis, and he had no idea how to fix it. Ethan Draven paced the empty chamber, muttering to himself as his mind raced for a way to salvage the summit. The pristine walls gleamed under the cold light, the faint hum of alien machinery providing the only sound. The Valorian delegation's abrupt exit hung over him like a storm cloud, the words, preparations for war, replaying in his head. Great job, Draven, he said to himself, running a hand through his hair. Your big diplomatic debut, and they think you're a warmonger. The chamber doors hissed open, and Ethan turned sharply to see a young Valorian enter. Their features were similar to the others, angular silver skin shimmering faintly, but their expression seemed softer, more inquisitive than the cold stares he'd received earlier. I am Azrix, the Valorian said, inclining their head in a gesture Ethan assumed was a greeting. I am here to assist in clarifying your intent. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Clarify? What's there to clarify? Your people think my PowerPoint presentation is a declaration of war. Azrix tilted their head. PowerPoint? This term does not translate. It's a... Never mind, Ethan said, waving a hand. What I mean is, everything I said was taken completely out of context. This summit was supposed to build trust, not send your leaders running for the nearest battle fleet. Azrix blinked slowly, their gaze unnervingly steady. It is not unusual for misunderstandings to occur. Your species' methods of communication are intricate. Intricate's one way to put it, Ethan muttered. Azrix gestured for him to sit, and the two of them settled at a small circular table near the edge of the chamber. Perhaps I can provide insight into the Valorian perspective, Azrix offered, and in return, you may explain certain perplexing aspects of your presentation. Deal, Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. Shoot. Azrix's gaze flickered with curiosity. Your smile, for example. You displayed it several times during your address. In Valorian culture, such an expression is interpreted as a mating invitation. Ethan nearly choked. What? Oh, no. Smiling is just friendliness. It's how humans show we're being nice. Ethan hesitated, realizing for the first time how hard it was to define something so intrinsic to his species. Humor is finding the absurdity in life. It's laughing at the unexpected, at the things that don't go as planned. Like your malfunctioning hologram? Asrix asked. Exactly, Ethan said, pointing at them. See? You're getting it already. Asrix tilted their head, a faint smile, their first, playing at the corners of their lips. Perhaps there is more to this human chaos than we initially understood. Encouraged, Ethan leaned forward. And if I can get your people to see that, maybe we can stop them from mobilizing fleets. You have my assistance, Asrix said, but I must warn you. The Valorian High Strategist does not adjust easily to new perspectives. Then we'll just have to be convincing, Ethan replied. Break a leg, right? Asrix frowned. Is this an appropriate time to wish for limb destruction? Ethan laughed, clapping them on the shoulder. We'll work on that. As they left the chamber together, Ethan felt the first stirrings of hope. The Valorians might not understand humans yet, but with Asrix's help, he had a chance to show them that chaos wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. The grand hall of the Valorian High Council buzzed with murmurs, an unusual occurrence for the normally silent and precise gathering space. Delegates stood in small clusters, their silver skin glinting under the chamber's luminous panels. The air was alive with curiosity, a rare break from their usual rigid decorum. I cannot believe we thought the human smile was a declaration of courtship, one delegate murmured, tilting their head in amused disbelief. And break a leg? Such an absurdly violent phrase to mean encouragement, another added, their tone laced with bemusement. It is no wonder we misunderstood their intentions. They are unlike any species we've encountered, said High Strategist Milex, his voice low but carrying an edge of reluctant intrigue. His gaze swept across the assembly. But this does not absolve us of caution. Their unpredictability, while fascinating, remains a potential threat. A ripple of agreement passed through the delegates, though several couldn't help but chuckle at their initial assumptions. For a species accustomed to precision and order, humanity's chaotic expressions were an enigma they couldn't quite ignore. Nearby, Asrix listened quietly, their sharp eyes observing the growing divide among their peers. Some were beginning to see humanity as more than a source of confusion, while others clung to their suspicion. Asrix's thoughts lingered on Ethan Draven, his humor, his openness, and his audacious confidence. It was both baffling and oddly inspiring. I believe we judged too quickly, Asrix finally said, their calm voice cutting through the chatter. If chaos and humor are strengths for humanity, perhaps we should learn from them rather than fear them. Several heads turned, tilting in curiosity, but Milex's expression darkened. And what if their chaos masks something more dangerous? What if their humor is a calculated deflection? Before Asrix could respond, a sharp chime echoed through the hall. A Valorian aide entered, their face etched with urgency. High Strategist, we have intercepted new data from the human envoy. You may wish to see this. The murmurs quieted as Milex gestured for the data to be displayed. A holographic screen materialized in the center of the hall, and a series of images and videos began to play. Ethan's initial presentation had been expanded, intentionally or not, to include more human cultural elements. Footage of crowded human cities, bustling markets, and elaborate festivals filled the screen. Vibrant colors and rapid movement overwhelmed the Valorians, their senses unaccustomed to such chaos. The images shifted to scenes of historical battles, athletes colliding in football games, and even a chaotic food fight that left the Valorian delegates visibly baffled. Milex narrowed his eyes, his tone sharp. What is the meaning of this? Are they taunting us with displays of disorder? Asrix's lips twitched into the faintest smile. I believe they are simply showing the breadth of their culture. Even their conflicts carry an undercurrent of creativity. Milex was unconvinced. And their battle simulations? How do you explain those? Before Asrix could respond, the screen froze on a still image of a human rally. Crowds filled the frame, waving flags and cheering wildly. A banner overhead read, Unity through strength. Strength through chaos, Milex muttered, his words dripping with skepticism. They've said as much before. They've also said much more, Asrix countered, stepping forward. Have we truly listened? Or have we only heard what we fear? Milix's gaze bore into them. You seem quite taken with these humans, Asrix. Perhaps too much. Asrix met his gaze steadily. Perhaps enough to see what others have missed. Milix waved a dismissive hand. Enough speculation. Call the emergency session. We must address this growing concern. Meanwhile, Ethan sat with his head in his hands in the smaller annex chamber where Asrix had left him. The sterile environment was doing nothing for his nerves. His brain replayed every interaction he'd had so far, from the misinterpreted smile to the strategic diagrams of Guernica. I'm a diplomat, not a comedian, he muttered, though he couldn't help but smirk at the absurdity of it all. But apparently I'm doing both. Asrix returned, their expression unreadable. The council is deliberating, Ethan groaned. That doesn't sound good. They are intrigued, Asrix offered, and skeptical. Your additional presentation has stirred both curiosity and concern. Ethan sat up straighter. Additional presentation? I didn't send anything else. Perhaps it was automated, Asrix suggested. It included more of your cultural displays, your cities, your conflicts, your food altercations. Ethan's eyes widened. Food altercations? Oh no. Did they see the food fight video? They did, Asrix confirmed, their tone carefully neutral. Ethan laughed despite himself. Great. Now they probably think we weaponize mashed potatoes. Asrix tilted their head. Do you? No, Ethan said quickly, still chuckling. That's just people being silly. It's not about violence. It's about fun. Asrix studied him. You often use this word. Fun. It appears central to your species' actions. It is, Ethan said, his tone softening. Fun is how we connect, how we blow off steam, how we survive. Life's messy. Fun makes it bearable. Valorians find survival through precision, Asrix said thoughtfully. Your species finds it through imperfection. That is, intriguing. Their conversation was interrupted by another chime. This time, it was Ethan's turn to frown. Let me guess. They want me back in the hot seat? Asrix nodded. The council has called an emergency session. They are concerned your cultural practices suggest covert militarization. Ethan groaned. Fantastic. Just what I needed. He stood, adjusting his jacket, and turned to Asrix. Any advice before I go in there and accidentally declare war again? Asrix hesitated. Be honest. Your humor, your openness. It is frustrating to some, but it is also what makes you compelling. Use that. Ethan gave them a small smile. Thanks, Asrix. Let's hope this doesn't end with me breaking an actual leg. The emergency session was held in the Grand Hall, where every Valorian delegate now sat in tense silence. Ethan stepped into the spotlight again, his heart pounding but his expression calm. High Strategist Milix wasted no time. Earth Delegate Draven, your displays have raised significant concerns. We demand an explanation. Ethan took a deep breath. High Strategist, I understand why you're concerned. Humanity's culture can seem chaotic, even threatening from an outside perspective. But what you're seeing isn't militarization or preparation for war. It's life. He gestured toward the holographic display. The battles, the sports, even the food fights, they're all part of how we grow, how we adapt, and how we connect. Yes, humans are messy. We argue, we make mistakes, we even laugh at things that scare us. But that's not a weakness. It's our strength. The room was silent, every Valorian eye fixed on him. Ethan pressed on. Our chaos isn't something to fear. It's what lets us create, innovate, and survive. And it's what we want to share with you, not as a threat, but as an invitation. Milix's gaze remained steely, but Ethan caught a flicker of doubt. An invitation, he repeated. Yes, Ethan said. To collaborate, to learn from each other. Chaos and precision, emotion and logic. Imagine what we could achieve together. Asrix stepped forward then, their voice steady. High Strategist, perhaps there is merit in exploring this collaboration. If humanity's chaos can inspire curiosity, it may also inspire progress. Milex didn't respond immediately, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. We will deliberate further. For now, the fleets remain on standby. As the council session ended, Ethan felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start. And for humanity, a start was all they needed. Ethan paced nervously in the side chamber as the Valorian Council deliberated in the Grand Hall. Every passing minute felt heavier, the stakes pressing down on him. The fleets remained on standby, their activation a single order away. Ethan's attempt to explain humanity's chaotic charm had bought him time, but not trust. He needed more than words to bridge the gap. Azrix entered, their steps light but deliberate. The council remains divided, they said, their voice calm but tinged with urgency. Some are intrigued by your explanations, but others see your chaos as a threat disguised as collaboration. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Figures. Words can only get me so far with people who analyze everything like it's a battle strategy. Asterix tilted their head. You seem discouraged. Not discouraged, Ethan said, though his shoulders sagged. Just stuck. I need to show them what I mean, something they can feel, not just dissect. Asterix's silver eyes brightened faintly, a sign of curiosity Ethan had learned to recognize. Show them? What do you have in mind? Ethan hesitated for a moment, then a grin spread across his face. I think it's time to introduce the Valorians to the most human way of resolving conflict. A game. Azrix's head tilted further, the alien equivalent of a raised eyebrow. A game? Yes, Ethan said, his excitement growing. Not war simulations, not strategic debates. A simple, no-stakes soccer match. It's chaotic, it's competitive, but it's also collaborative. And it's fun. Asterix blinked, their tone cautious. You believe this will convince the council? It has to, Ethan said, his determination hardening. It'll show them how humans channel our instincts, not through destruction, but through connection. An hour later, the Grand Hall was abuzz with activity as Valorian delegates gathered, their usual composure tinged with confusion. The center of the room had been cleared, replaced with a hastily constructed field. Ethan stood in the middle, explaining the rules of soccer to a growing crowd of Valorians, his enthusiasm contrasting sharply with their stoic expressions. This, Ethan said, holding up a soccer ball, is how we play. The goal is simple. Get the ball into the other team's net. No weapons, no destruction, just teamwork, strategy, and a little chaos. Milex, standing at the edge of the field, frowned. And this activity serves what purpose? It's not just an activity, Ethan replied. It's a metaphor. Soccer is a perfect example of how humans resolve conflict. It's competitive, sure, but it's also about unity. Players from different backgrounds come together, working toward a common goal. You'll see. Azrix stepped forward, their expression unreadable. The council has agreed to observe. Several delegates have volunteered to participate. Ethan grinned. Great. Let's split into teams, humans and Valorians mixed together. The volunteers, both human and Valorian, moved hesitantly onto the field. Ethan handed out colored vests to distinguish the teams, chuckling as the Valorians inspected the fabric like it might explode. All right, team, Ethan said, clapping his hands. Let's show them how it's done. The match began awkwardly, with Valorians struggling to adapt to the game's fluidity. One player, attempting to defend their territory, grabbed the ball with their hands and froze when Ethan shouted, No hands! No hands? The Valorian asked, their tone baffled. But our appendages are most efficient for holding. It's a rule, Ethan explained, trying not to laugh. It makes the game more challenging. Challenging or inefficient? The Valorian muttered, but they complied, nudging the ball with their foot. As the game progressed, chaos reigned. Valorians collided with each other, confused by the lack of synchronized movements. One delegate misinterpreted a goal celebration as a territorial display, responding with a stiff bow that only added to the confusion. Meanwhile, the humans, laughing and cheering, encouraged their alien teammates, offering high fives that were tentatively returned. A pivotal moment came when Azrix, playing as a midfielder, intercepted the ball with surprising agility. They passed it to a Valorian forward, who hesitated at the goal line before kicking it in. The humans erupted into cheers, while the Valorian forward turned to Asrix, tilting their head. "We succeeded. Why are they vocalizing?" "They are celebrating," Asrix explained, a hint of a smile on their face. "It is a human expression of unity." The forward tilted their head further. "Intriguing." On the sidelines, Milix watched the scene unfold, his stern expression softening as he observed the humans' enthusiasm. For the first time, he began to see the appeal of their chaos, not as a threat, but as something strangely inspiring. As the match continued, something remarkable happened. The Valorians, initially rigid and confused, began to adapt. Their movements grew more fluid, their hesitation fading as they followed the humans' lead. A Valorian defender, after accidentally scoring an own goal, was met with laughter and good-natured ribbing rather than scorn. The moment seemed to unlock something in the Valorians, who started to relax, even enjoy themselves. By the time the final whistle blew, the humans and Valorians were mingling on the field, exchanging gestures of camaraderie. The room buzzed with energy, the air no longer sterile but alive with the sound of laughter and conversation. Ethan, sweating and out of breath, approached Milix, who stood at the edge of the field with his arms crossed. "Well?" Ethan asked, wiping his forehead. "What did you think?" Milix was silent for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the field where humans and Valorians stood side by side. Finally, he spoke. "Your game. It is illogical, inefficient. And yet, Ethan prompted. Milix's expression softened, his tone thoughtful. "And yet it achieved what words could not. Your chaos has unity within it. It is a contradiction, but one that intrigues me." Ethan grinned. "That's humanity for you. A walking contradiction." Milix inclined his head. "Perhaps there is more to your species than we initially perceived. You have given us much to consider." Asrix approached then, their silver skin glinting faintly in the light. "High Strategist, may I suggest that we further explore this collaboration? There is much we could learn from each other." Milix nodded slowly. "Agreed. The fleets will remain on standby, but for now we will continue this dialogue." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It wasn't a full victory, but it was progress, a spark of understanding in a place where mistrust had taken root. As the Valorian delegates began to disperse, Ethan turned to Asrix, his grin returning. "Looks like we broke through." Asrix tilted their head, their expression almost amused. "Indeed, though I believe the term is broke a leg." Ethan laughed, clapping them on the shoulder. "Close enough." Together they left the field, the first threads of a new alliance beginning to form in their wake. The echoes of cheers and laughter still resonated through the grand hall as Ethan Draven sat on the sidelines, sipping from a water bottle. Around him, Valorian delegates lingered on the makeshift soccer field, their usually rigid expressions softened by curiosity and a newfound energy. Humans and Valorians stood side by side, exchanging cautious smiles and even attempting high fives. For the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt hope, not just for the summit, but for something bigger. Asrix approached, their silver skin glinting faintly under the bright lights. "Your soccer match appears to have had an effect. The High Strategist has requested a debriefing." Ethan grinned, though his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "Requested a debriefing? That's Valorian for 'we're intrigued,' right?" Asrix tilted their head in what Ethan now recognized as a signal of mild amusement. "Perhaps." "Let's not keep them waiting then," Ethan said, pushing himself up and brushing off his suit. "Lead the way." The debriefing took place in a smaller chamber, where High Strategist Milix and several senior Valorian delegates waited in their customary stillness. The atmosphere, however, was different, less tense, more curious. The faint hum of Valorian technology underscored the quiet, punctuated only by the occasional click of alien data pads. Ethan stood at the head of the room, Asrix by his side, as Milix began the session. "Earth Delegate Draven," the High Strategist said, his voice measured, "you're demonstration was unconventional, yet it has provided insights we did not anticipate. Ethan smirked. Unconventional is kind of my brand. Milex ignored the quip, gesturing toward a holographic display that showed highlights from the soccer match. Valorians hesitating, learning, adapting, and finally celebrating alongside humans. Your game revealed aspects of your culture that are difficult for Valorians to comprehend. Let me guess, Ethan said. The chaos? Yes, Milex replied. And the joy. Valorians are not accustomed to deriving pleasure from unpredictability, yet your species appears to thrive on it. That's because chaos isn't just disorder, Ethan explained, stepping forward. It's potential. It's the unexpected giving birth to something new. That's what creativity is, finding beauty and solutions in the mess. Soccer, art, humor, they're all ways we embrace that potential. Milex tilted his head slightly, a gesture Ethan now knew meant skepticism mixed with curiosity. But chaos also breeds conflict. True, Ethan admitted, his tone serious. But it also teaches us to adapt, to collaborate, to find common ground. Look at the game. You saw how humans and Valorians, two very different species, work together. That's what humanity offers. A way to turn conflict into connection. The room fell silent as the delegates absorbed his words. Asrix, sensing an opportunity, stepped forward. High strategist, the humans' approach may seem alien to us, but it has merit. Their ability to adapt and connect could complement our precision and structure. Together, we could achieve more than either of us could alone. Milex's gaze shifted to Asrix, then back to Ethan. You speak of collaboration, yet history shows that your species is prone to division and violence. Ethan nodded, unflinching. You're right. We've made our share of mistakes, plenty of them. But we've also learned from them. That's the thing about humans. We're always learning, always striving to be better. Our history isn't perfect, but it's full of examples of people coming together, even in the face of chaos. Milex leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. And what lesson do you wish us to take from this? Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. That strength doesn't come from avoiding chaos. It comes from facing it head-on, from finding unity and purpose in the mess. Humanity isn't perfect, but our imperfections make us adaptable, creative, and resilient. That's what we bring to the table. The room was silent again, the tension thick but not hostile. Finally, Milex spoke. Your words are compelling, Earth Delegate Draven, but words alone are not enough. Ethan smiled. Then let's build something together. Actions speak louder, right? Over the next several hours, the Valorian Council debated behind closed doors while Ethan and Asrix waited in the annex chamber. Ethan paced the room, his nervous energy filling the space. You think they'll listen? He asked, glancing at Asrix. I believe your actions have given them much to consider, Asrix replied. Valorians value logic, but even logic cannot ignore results. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Let's hope you're right. Finally, the chamber doors opened, and a Valorian aide gestured for them to enter. Ethan straightened his suit, his heart pounding as he followed Asrix back into the council chamber. Milex stood at the center, his expression as unreadable as ever. The other delegates watched in silence as the high strategist addressed the room. Earth Delegate Draven, Milex began, his voice steady. Your demonstration has revealed aspects of your culture that challenge our understanding. While your chaos remains unsettling, it also carries potential we cannot ignore. Ethan held his breath as Milex continued. The Council has decided to proceed with the trade agreement under the condition that cultural exchanges be included as a core component. We will study your methods further, not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Relief and pride flooded Ethan's chest. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. You won't regret it, High Strategist. Regret remains to be seen, Milex replied, though there was a hint of humor in his tone. As the summit concluded, Ethan stood at the observation deck of the Valorian capital, watching the alien city below. Its sleek, symmetrical structures gleamed under the faint light of the twin moons, a stark contrast to Earth's chaotic skylines. Yet, for the first time, he felt a connection to this strange, orderly world. Asterix joined him, their presence quiet, but comforting. "You have accomplished much, Ethan Draven." Ethan chuckled. "Not bad for a guy who almost started a galactic war with a smile." Asterix tilted their head. "Perhaps your chaos was exactly what we needed." Ethan glanced at them, a warm smile on his face. "And maybe your structure was what we needed. Looks like we make a good team." Asterix's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. "Indeed." The next morning, as Ethan prepared to leave for Earth, Milex approached him at the docking bay. The high strategist's expression was as stern as ever, but his tone held a rare note of respect. "Earth Delegate Draven," Milex said, inclining his head, "you have given us much to consider. Perhaps chaos and order are not so different after all." Ethan extended a hand, and after a brief hesitation, Milex shook it. "Let's see where this collaboration takes us." As Ethan boarded the shuttle, he couldn't help but grin. Turning to Asterix, who had decided to join him as part of the cultural exchange program, he said, "Next time we'll introduce them to karaoke." Asterix tilted their head. "Karaoke?" "You'll love it," Ethan said with a laugh as the shuttle ascended, leaving the Valorian capital behind. The summit was over, but for humanity and Valoria, it was just the beginning. Together, they would learn that chaos and order, far from being opposites, could forge something extraordinary.